Is the Senator from Lincoln, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, in the 22 municipalities of my district on Mid-Coast, Medicaid expansion under this bill would enable about 1,800 people to gain access to health care and provide jobs for about another 124 people. I've heard from people throughout the district that are counting on Maine accepting federal funds to do right by them. They are asking us to bring health care within their reach by expanding Medicaid. The recession has been hard on Maine people, both the many working at jobs that don't pay enough to afford health care and those who no longer have a job. Now more than ever, it is critical for Maine to accept federal funds to expand health care to tens of thousands of Mainers, including 3,000 veterans. In January of this year, nearly 25,000 Mainers, including nearly 15,000 working parents, lost health care because we did not accept federal funds for expansion. I know of their circumstances because I've heard from them. This issue is one of not only quality of life, but gambling with the lives of fellow Mainers. Here are a couple of their stories. Sister Elizabeth: I'm a religious sister with a vow of poverty. I, with another sister who is also losing Maine care, earn a limited income by baking and making fruitcakes at Christmas. Our lives are organized around our daily focus on prayer, on offering very low-cost retreats to any who need a time away in peace and solitude, and on offering low-cost retreats and workshops to parishes and groups that want one. We were on Dirigo, where we were able to contribute at least a portion of the monthly cost. Then Dirigo directed us to apply for Maine Care, which we received, but there is no way we can afford to pay the full price for health insurance, and under the Affordable Care Act, we are not eligible for government subsidy. But we are very eligible for Maine Care if it were not for this cruel and unnecessary cutoff. This is another working Maine person who needs our help. Her name is Brady Pierce. I live in Booth Bay, Maine. I'm a lobsterman, but last spring tore my bicep. I had Maine Care then and was able to get the surgery I needed. I was kicked off Maine Care at the end of December, and so have not been able to continue with the needed physical therapy and follow-up to get my arm healed and back to normal. Not only did I lose part of that last lobstering season, but with my arm the way it is now, I'm not sure if I'll be in good enough shape for this year's season. I'm also a diabetic, so have had to pay for my medications out of pocket. I hope Maine Care passes this year, so I can continue fixing my arm and get back to lobstering. Another hard-working Maine person. I'm a professional trained hand weaver. This is Sarah, Waldoboro, self-employed in Maine since 1982. As with many of my colleagues in the creative professions, my income is marginal. In 2013, the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission conducted a survey of Lincoln County artists to gather wage data. Of 320 respondents, 39% of individual artists earned less than $11,490 from their art or craft activity. She goes on to say that Medicaid expansion would mean that many of us have preventative care for the first time in our adult lives. Very little preventative care has been accessible to me. It's most concerning to me. She says, my doctor recommends tests and procedures. Most I have to decline. It worries me because we all know a lack of preventive care shortens people's lifespans. Indeed, I've watched several friends die in the past few years because their illness was not caught in time. For myself and most of us in this income range, a $15,000 catastrophic insurance policy is not an option. The premiums are unaffordable, and the deductible is so high it prevents us from going to the doctor. Knowing what it means to people like Brady, Sister Elizabeth, Sarah, and 1,800 others in my district, it is clear that expanding Medicaid is the right decision, both morally and ethically. It is also the fiscally responsible thing to do. Refusing expansion would mean losing out on $250 million per year coming into Maine for health services and employment contributing to our economy. $250 million ensuring Maine people have family doctors. It's a quality of life issue to ensure people have preventive care, to stay healthy instead of hoping they don't get desperately ill. Now is also the time to start bending the curve downward on health care costs, and preventive care is an important step toward that goal. That makes expansion a win economically, a win on quality of life, and a win in the battle to curb overall health care costs. This should not be a partisan issue. Political games should never come before standing up for Maine people and doing right by them. But we've heard some things today about people able to take care of themselves. And I've just told you examples of people who are trying to do just that. They're unable to without being able to have access to health care, which is what we're deciding today. Talked about letting the dust settle. I'm afraid that for people like this, it'll settle on people who no longer are able to hold a job because of their illnesses. People who will die because we don't make health care accessible to them. That's where the dust will settle. We talked about costs. And there are no credible analyses to substantiate the claims of dire costs. The Alexander report has been exposed for its $575 million math error, its incomplete analysis, and its political motivations. Let's talk plainly about Maine's real $200 million budget challenge, because we shouldn't look myopically at what we don't have for funding for things like fighting green crab. The tax cuts in 2012 cost us a big part of our budget, benefited Maine's wealthy greatly, while benefiting Maine's poor, but far too little to make up for last year's circuit breaker program cuts. Foregoing that tax revenue had a real impact on cuts to departments. Meanwhile, total spending on Medicaid in Maine was the same in 2013 as it was in 2009. And spending increased just 0.1% in the first half of this fiscal year. It's math that anyone can understand if we set aside faulty math long enough to look at the real numbers. You know, we talked about healthcare expansion, and some have characterized it as welfare. Others have pointed out that we here get healthcare on the public dollar. Is that welfare too? I think it's easy to put labels on things, but you've heard today a lot of the reality of what this means to Maine people without labels. The decision we make here today has nothing to do with balancing our state budget. Because for the next 3 years, the Medicaid expansion, and I suppose that's actually 2.5 years now, we're behind on getting this done. Medicaid expansion accepts and uses 100% federal funding, and we are not locked in. Let me repeat that. This decision has nothing to do with balancing our state budget. The state's nonpartisan fiscal office found the bill would save the state $3.4 million in the first year alone. In direct budget impact, it's essentially break even. The decision we make here today has everything to do with a different balance sheet. How you treat the least among you. We are deciding whether we care about the health care needs of struggling Maine people. I shared the circumstances of some people in my district. Would you honestly say they are not truly needy? Don't they deserve to be seen? In my heart, the rhetoric and politics have no place. They're part of the reality in these halls. But in the end, they are not what matter. People matter. I'll be voting on this bill with a clear conscience and a steadfast conviction that it's the right thing to do. And I know that if this bill becomes law, it will do so with the support of a 61% majority of the people of Maine who feel as I do. Thank you.